I don't think we completed this verse, but we had began this verse. Okay. So just a quick recap of what we're talking about. So basically, we are at the point in which there is a lot of conversation about the munafiqun. And Surah Nisaa is very detailed in terms of their attitudes, things about their personality that really illustrates their intentions, really gives you an impression of who they are and how different they are from others. And one thing that we've already established and we could see is that the munafiqun really went above and beyond in their hypocrisy. So they would do things like they would be at the front line of every salah, because salah time was actually their meeting time. Their meetings would happen at prayer. How? Well, that was their opportunity to really showcase to others and convince others that we were all on the same page. We were just as devoted as you guys. But as you and I know, and this surah has taught us that their intentions was the complete opposite. And then Allah highlights some of their behaviors, some of their attitudes. And this is one of those verse 72. Now, this verse in particular dealt with an issue that was very consistent with hypocrisy and the munafiqun, and that was the tactic of delaying and holding back. And in the Qur'an, in this particular ayah, verse 72, let me just bring it up there. Verse 72, as you can see right here, and no doubt there is somebody who wants to slow things a lot. That was called bati. وَإِنَّ مِنْكُمْ لَمَنْ لَيُبَطِّئَنْ bati, to slow down, to procrastinate. So some of the examples that we use are things like, I forgot something, I need to go back home. So basically, picture how the scene is at the moment. The call for battle has been made. The Prophet ﷺ is trying to mobilize as many of the companions as he could. And this is for any given battle. So it's not a particular one like Uhud or Tabuk or Ahzab or so on. No. This is just generally speaking, when the call is made. It takes a lot of time and prep. It may take several weeks before they are ready to march. So they have to get their families all sorted out. They have to make sure that food and all of that stuff is left behind. They got to make sure that if they do pass away in that battle, who's going to look after the family? And all of these logistical things have to be sorted out. So when all is said and done, the day has come, it's time to get to the battlefield, that's when the munafiqun start disrupting that whole process. So one of the ways that they did that is what you see in front of you. They tried to slow things down and procrastinate. Even there will be some ayat you will see today that they would actually confront many of these companions who were new to all of this. They had never been in a battle before. And when you're, I guess you could say, a freshman companion, if that makes sense, right? So you're very new to this whole movement and to this whole way of life. You became very vulnerable to that kind of propaganda. So when you heard that munafiqun came and confronted you and said, like, listen, man, you sacrificed a lot already. You gave up your home and your land and your heritage back in Mecca. Now on top of that, you're going to go and risk your life because this man said so. So it was very easy for some of the companions who heard that to be like, yeah, actually, you know what, you're right. What am I doing? And I'll just forget him. I'll catch the next battle next time, And then even there are stories of if one hypocrite would say, okay, I need to go back to my house. He tried to lure other companions. Hey, listen, could you guys come with me? I'm scared. There might be like, I don't know, a wolf or something. There might be something around. I need you to come with me. But actually, the intent behind that is again to procrastinate. Now you have an example just below on the next page 58. There are a couple of points there that I want to look at. Munafiq element within the Muslims. So take a look at this paragraph. Somebody will really, really, really try to slow the Muslims down. I think perhaps we all have somebody in our lives like this. Always try to hold you back. So like, for example, for me personally, like when I was memorizing Qur'an, the biggest challenge was not to memorize the Qur'an. the biggest challenge for me was to try to gain strength listening to people who told me, that's so much. Well, you really think you can do that? Like other Muslims, within the community. Some people tell me, you don't even know Arabic. It's going to be impossible. You're going to mess up so much. Lots of people just you can't do that. You can't excel to that extent. And for me personally, it was very difficult. And so for a lot of people, these are some of the things that psychologists, they study. These are some of the triggers that really cause somebody to lose confidence, to lose that idea of self-worth. And so this is a very typical tactic of the munafiqun you will see throughout the Qur'an whenever they are talked about. Moreover, they will be slow as well. We've talked about that. Why do we have to go to war? They will be hoping that if they could procrastinate, the situation will change and then they will not have to go out within the Muslims. So we've discussed that entire paragraph. Now as we continue, the ayah continues and it tells us a lot when a calamity strikes. So I think this is where we had paused. So when an actual calamity, so when the battle begins, and lives are being lost one after the other. So let's keep this real now. Let's go to the Battle of Uhud. How many companions were killed in the Battle of Uhud? Does anybody know? 70, right? Approximately 70, right? So 70 companions are martyred in this particular battle. And before that battle, it was the Battle of Uhud, like in the planning stages, where the munafiqun and their propaganda, their campaign to slow things down and to steer this commitment of companions to another direction, it was the Battle of Uhud that they really pushed themselves and exercised that propaganda to its max. So the Muslims were approximately 1,000 in number, but when the battle began, a third of that was lost. So they were roughly 700 or less. During the battle, as battle is happening and unfolding, more of the Muslims as well kind of question things that they would hear the munafiqun say. So there were rumors spread that the Prophet ﷺ had been killed. He was assassinated. So some of the companions, when they heard that, they were like, what's the point? Forget it. If he's gone, like we were doing this all for him anyway, so forget it. And later realizing and later getting confirmation that he wasn't, but it was already too late, they became vulnerable to the opposition. So this ayah continues and it says now, here's another, I guess you could say, attitude of the munafiqun. When a calamity strikes, he says, Allah had really saved me from all of that chaos and all of that problem. So they all of a sudden, alhamdulillah, when good times roll around, oh, I'm saved, I'm here, I'm good. Alhamdulillah, it's all good. But when tough times come around, you'll see who they blame for this. So the munafiqun, every time when things are easy, things are comfortable, they'll always associate that to, Allah is just so good to us. Until something goes wrong, they end up blaming someone for it. And you'll see that a little bit later. So they would say Allah has favored us, meaning Allah had protected us, that I was not present with them. See how detailed this is? It's really like, when I looked at this at first, I was really shocked that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really goes into detail to capture this whole scene. Verse 73, وَلَئِنْ أَصَابَكُمْ فَضْلٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ. But when good times roll around, fadlun, literally it says there bounty. Fadlun is more like the kind of blessing that you experienced that you did not prepare for. Like you never thought that you would gain that kind of blessing or feel the way that you feel. It just happened and you say, this is a fadl from Allah. Everybody understand? So it's kind of one of those extra bonuses that come out of a particular act that you yourself didn't expect it was going to happen. So an example of that is in prayer. So you'd be praying, whatever prayer, and as you're praying, you start concentrating on something that really keeps you focused in prayer. And then you become emotional. And then now that prayer becomes the sweetest prayer of your whole life. That's a fadl from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You didn't expect it and it just happened and you embrace it. So the munafiqun, they say, whenever this happens to us, they claim, this is fadlun min Allah. See what they say? Oh, this bounty, this amazing opportunity. Oh, this is from Allah, man. Okay. Allah, He will say as if there is no love between you. When soldiers come back from a successful mission, oh my. Okay, let's just pause there. So here's what's happening. The munafiqun are now meeting some of the companions who are coming back from war. They go up to some of them and they say to these companions, oh, you were saved just like me. Oh, this is a blessing from Allah. You're still alive and I'm still alive. What are they doing? What's the problem with this? What's the problem with that statement? Like, what do you think is the hidden tactic or agenda behind that? So the munafiq who did nothing, who lied, who hid from the call, eventually confronts those who survived the battle, and then he says to them this, as if there was like no love between the two of you, meaning the love that Allah expects is the love of sacrifice. So when Allah says there's no love between the two of you, meaning that if you really were genuine and you wanted the best for one another, even the munafiqun would have gone out there and risked his life for the sake of Allah, just like the rest of those companions. But he didn't do that. There was a hidden agenda behind all of this. Does anybody know what that is? Do you think it's fair that somebody who didn't participate could say something like that? Like, hey, you're alive and I'm alive. Oh my God, alhamdulillah, we're so lucky. Is that fair? Why isn't it fair?
I pretended that they have gone for a while. He fought to stay alive. They didn't even go for
So the munafiq in this case is trying to equate what with the person who sacrificed who really risked his life. He's trying to equate what? As though he is the same candidate that deserves the same blessings and rewards as the guy who just fought. That's totally wrong. And that's totally unfair. That's what Allah is calling out here. It's insane how detailed this is going in, really capturing the attitude of munafiqun. So they think that they can put themselves the same par or the same level as you without doing the work. Don't we all know somebody like that? Don't we all know somebody? Oh man, there's a lot of Muslims like that. I didn't go for Hajj, and I'm still doing fine. You went for 12 Hajj, why? No, we're both praying. We're both doing everything correct. We're not drinking. We're not involved in all of that stuff. We're still good. What makes you think you're going to Jannah and I'm not? I probably will get there before you. What are you saying? So there's a principle now that's extracted from this whole conversation, and that is every servant will reap the benefits of every ounce of effort that they put forth for the sake of Allah. Even if that effort still somewhat keeps you in the same category with people who don't work as hard. So for example, if you pray like all the dozens of other Muslims beside you that pray, right? But you're crying in salah, or you're really focused and you're really putting the effort to concentrate, etc. But the person beside you can't wait for salah to finish. Are you both going to be in the same spot in the akhirah if this is the state you meet Allah? No, but you've performed the exact same act of worship. So you see what I'm saying? It's like, even if you're in the same category, does not necessarily mean that you're going to be judged the same as everyone else in that category. So despite that, at the end of the day, both of these individuals here are showing gratitude to Allah, does not necessarily mean Allah will accept from both of them. Right? Really, really important, very meticulous in its detail. Then Allah concludes and says, look, listen to this. This happens very rarely in Qur'an. Then Allah says now, Ya laytani. Ya laytani. Have you heard this before? Let me see if I can get my trusty pointer. Okay. Come back here. Okay, here we go. So, this word here, Ya laytani, it's rare in the Qur'an. But there is one other place that this term, this phrase is found. It's in Surah Al-Furqan, which is in Surah number 25. Now listen to how, or what this phrase is. In Surah Al-Furqan, Allah said, Ya waylata laytani lam attakhidh fulanan khalila. The person, there's going to be somebody that will come on the day of judgment and they'll complain to Allah. And they will say, Ya laytani. Laytani is this kind of expression when you just stop for a moment and you think and you're like, oh my God, what did I just do? That's called laytani. Oh man, I just lost that opportunity. So it's kind of like an expression of shock. You're in a state of shock and this is my reality. Oh my God, this is what I was supposed to do and I didn't do that. So they end up saying, Ya laytani kuntu ma'ahum fa'afuza fawzan 'azima. So this is where the munafiq will then realize, when Allah makes it clear to them, oh my, if I was with them, I would have had true success. I would have really been amongst those who are favored from Him. Now go back to Surah Al-Furqan. Laytani is used to describe the friends that you should have had and you chose not to befriend them. So on the day of judgment, Allah will bring that individual and they will say, Ya waylata laytani. I didn't take fulan and khalil. I didn't take this person as my friend. Instead, who did I choose? لَقَدْ أَضَلَّنِي عَنِ الذِّكْرِ بَعْدَ إِذْ جَاءَنِي. So instead, they ended up with somebody who steered them away from Allah's remembrance. Don't you think that that's an ayah for young people? You know, we always talk about, let's talk about the things, like how does the Qur'an address young people? Well, this is one of those ayat. Allah is literally saying, you're going to regret being friends with people like that. You're going to regret it. And you're going to regret it so much that on the day of judgment, you're going to be begging, saying, Ya laytani, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. So, laytani also, so it's an expression of when you're in the state of shock, but it's also an expression of desperation. Okay? You're desperate, oh my goodness, I ran out of time. How I wish. رَبِّ ارْجِعُونِي لَعَلِّي أَعْمَلُ صَالِحًا فِي مَا تَرَكْتُ. How I wish I could just go back and do the things that I left behind. So it's a very powerful phrase, a very powerful term. Here's the thing. It's not a common term that's used. As a matter of fact, you know where you'll hear laytani from when you study Arabic? It's found more in poetry. So those who speak Arabic don't really use this. And I'm not really sure why. I don't know why. But it's not a common phrase in the Arabic language, but mentioned very strategically in Qur'an. So the point is that there is remorse, there is regret, but there's also desperation that's associated with that. So what we also learn from verse 73 is the last point that you see here. This point here. That the hypocrite, one of their attitudes is that they strive for either praise or worldly acquisition, right? So the praise part, we've already started getting introduced to this. Let's continue. فَأَفُوزَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. Actually, there is one thing that I would really like to highlight for you in verse 73. All of you see at the end of your translation where it says, a fine thing should I then have made of it. Everybody see that at the end? It's kind of like the wording is kind of weird, isn't it? The wording is kind of strange. That's because فَأَفُوزْ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا, there's like a triple emphasis on this. So, in other words, the munafiq is saying, had I only done things right, I would have 100% be guaranteed, no question about it, success. So they're not just saying, I'd be on the right side. They're guaranteeing the that Allah will fulfill His promise. If you get on this side, you're done. You will have it all. You will have all the success. So there is an emphasis that when you stay on this particular path, the path that Allah expects from all of us, that His promise, إِنَّكَ لَا تُخْلِفُ الْمِيعَادِ, He won't break His promise. So it kind of helps us to kind of reinforce our commitment to this path, especially when we come and we confront the munafiqun. I've said this to you before. They are the most difficult group. They're the most difficult group that mankind will ever confront. It's difficult in the sense that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to detect their movements, their intentions, all of that stuff. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ was so fearful of them. You know what always blows my mind? The Prophet ﷺ had guidance directly from Allah. Is this correct? Okay. The Prophet ﷺ had protection directly from Allah. Correct? He got guidance and instruction whenever he was in trouble. You agree? The angels used to come and chat with him. And the greatest of them, Jibreel alayhi salam, right, which he comes with his own, realm of protection that he offers to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So, if you were in his shoes, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, would you worry about anything? Just think about it for a minute. If you had that kind of connection with Allah, would there be anything in this world that would frighten you or scare you or upset you? No. No. And still the Prophet ﷺ is so fearful of this group, which really gives you an insight just how terrible this group is in front of Allah. Like it's really and truly the worst of the worst. Well, despite, there is one footnote that I want to share and then we'll move on. Despite him being fearful, despite that he was scared, he did not back away. He did not tell the companions, hey, let's go build a house somewhere else. Let's go start a masjid away from these guys. No, he confronted them. So you have propaganda of hate. You have propaganda of misrepresentation. There's marginalization happening. Does this all sound familiar, by the way? So there's all of this campaign against you. None of it is true. And it's very powerful because it seems like it's working. There are followers that are, vulnerable to this message and they end up following along. They're like, yeah, you are right. Forget this man. So it's working. It almost feels like these ayat have just been revealed about 10 years ago, doesn't it? Yeah.
Is it clear who the hypocrites are?
Say it again.
Is it clear who the hypocrites are?
Um,
Because isn't that part of the feeling of uneasiness that one would have? Because then you can't tell.
So
So you kind of at some point question.
So there's a good question. I mean, is it clear who the hypocrites are? Yes and no. We know of some hypocrites, at least historically, by name, right? But in this day and age, all we know are qualities. Scholars say that one of the reasons why Allah did not, call out and really show the rest of us, this is exactly who these people are. One of the reasons why Allah didn't do that is it's not important in the sense that don't worry about that too much. Because you're going to see today, very shortly, how Allah handles them. So, although they might be around you or in front of you, you as a believer and someone of Iman cannot be overly consumed and involved in that. You got to make sure that you remember what is your priority. What is that, students? Your link between you and? Because if you get overly engrossed in all of this, guess what ends up happening to your Iman now? Not only does it go down, but some of the nifaq from that goes where? Goes into you. Haven't you heard stories of Muslims who have renounced their faith or had questioned it And these were like people who started off on the right path, like they learned everything. And then all of a sudden the guy, starts a YouTube channel and has all these amazing lectures and reminders. And then all of a sudden one day, this next video is released. I have left Islam, and I'll tell you why. And then that's it. That's how the cycle continues. And then it's usually associated with, I was talking with these people, I'm debating with these people, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I listen to this. All of this is Allah saying, yeah, I know it's there, don't worry about it. I didn't specify who they are because there's a higher priority. We're going to see what that is in a minute. Allah continues and He says, I'm just trying to see just some of the things, some of the notes that you all have in your booklet. Okay, we've already talked about munafiq, his idea. Okay, so فَلْيُقَاتِلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يَشْرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا بِالْآخِرَةِ. So let those fight in the path of Allah who sold off the worldly life for the hereafter. Remember, in context, this is all happening in times of war. Students, what does the Qur'an mean when it says that they have sold off worldly life? Like, what's this transaction really saying? They've sold off the life of this world for the hereafter. Who is Allah talking to here, by the way, or about? These are the believers now. What is Allah really saying when He says they sold off worldly life for the akhirah? Should be very obvious. Their priority is not worldly life. So in other words, it's not that they just hated worldly life. It means that they prioritized the akhirah over the worldly life. That was the only incentive that they took on themselves to join these battles. Do you see how different that is, right? They don't care about anything else. They want to please the Prophet ﷺ, and they want to get to the akhirah and be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So Allah is saying, those are the people you want in these kinds of scenarios, right? You want them to be in these battles. Can I ask you, does this ayah, is there something strange about it? Like, how does this ayah come off to you? Because there's something about this ayah that it could easily ring off the wrong message, and we hinted to it earlier, just a few minutes ago. See the word or the words sold off? Have you met Muslims that say things like, I'm not going to buy a car, or it's a short life, and if I do buy a car, I'm just going to look for one that somebody threw away, duct tape it, and just that's the sunnah. One time somebody walked into a masjid, I won't say where. It was like minus 30 outside. Brother walks in, he has his thobe on, and he had these ankle socks on. And he comes in, he's like this, right? So myself and a few others, we saw him, right? We just said to him, like, you're crazy, bro. What are you doing dressed like that? He's like, for the sake of Allah, man, it's the sunnah. I'm like, bro, that's not the sunnah, man. What are you doing? That's like a recipe for the hospital or something. That's not sunnah, man. Some people, what you're seeing here is that if you don't understand the wording here, it's very easy, instead of looking at one lane as opposed to the other, worldly versus hereafter, it almost kind of, if you're not cautious, you kind of see two extremes here instead. This is how students misinterpret verses. Because the wording, see how obvious it is? Those who sold off, who cares about dunya life? No. Slow down. The Prophet ﷺ, did he not describe things about this world? Like the mountains, the trees, the oceans? Didn't talk about them? He told us to plant trees. He told us to do that. Even if the day of judgment was tomorrow, plant trees. Take care of the environment. Keep the environment clean. Don't pollute animals. Be respectful of them. Don't torture them. He told us to actually be responsible And there is like the worldly life is actually, it's very beautiful. We should all feel privileged to be here. We should be happy.
We ask for the best of the
Yeah.
universe.
So when we say here, it's just like I said, they're both beautiful. But you prioritize one because why? Hereafter is eternal. This one comes to an end. And so that's why you don't prioritize that. But since you're here, you can enjoy it too. You can enjoy all that Allah has blessed in this world, and the fact that He put you here is an indication that you can do that. But the moment you prioritize this over the afterlife. Now, a very quick question. How do you know or feel or can visually examine around you in your life that you have prioritized the world over the akhirah? Tell me something that could indicate to you, I'm really glued to worldly life and I totally forgot about akhirah. Like, how do you develop that sort of attitude? Everybody understand the question, right? It's easier said than done, don't you think? How do you prioritize a world that you have never seen? You can't dream about it. You don't know exactly what it is until you die. So how do you build the strength of feeling certain that this hereafter is there? When you've got all of this that you can feel, touch, smell, and engage with right in front of you. See, this is a question, we don't talk about this stuff. It's one of those questions we take for granted, don't we? We always talk about all the blessings of the akhirah and Jannah and so on. But very rarely do we address, okay, how do we know it's actually there? That's what young people, that's what they're curious. We have to trust the message. Okay, hypothetically, I don't trust it. I mean, it's beautiful, but I want to see something. Can I get like a branch from Jannah just so I can hold on to it? Look, I want something. How do you respond to this? Jannah has water. Could I get a cup? Just so I can taste it. Okay, it's there. I want more of this water. Like, what do you do? Mm-hmm.
Well, Allah does talk about how the form that we are in Jannah is very different than the form we are here. So even your body cannot handle the amazement of that world. We see that to be a mercy within itself. If you really want a taste of Jannah, just take the moment to be grateful about 3 things every day, and you will get a bit of taste of what possibly your life could be in the hereafter.
You know, that was beautiful. And I 100% agree with you. I just want to know if it's really there. You're absolutely right. But tackle this uncertainty that I'm having, that all of those beautiful things are actually waiting for me. Do you see how tricky this question is and how crucial it is? So one way to respond to this is the person who's asking these kinds of questions has to be able to re-engage and study this book properly. Because, why do I say that? Because the overall perfection, accuracy, eloquence, style, everything that the Qur'an presents is enough of an indication that we all know this. It's not from some man. It's actually, there's something higher than that. There's an entity. It's made predictions. It's challenged mankind. It's still preserved in its original form. And we can prove all of that stuff. It's actually how these kinds of ayat, how it's introduced to the person, the questioner. So the first thing is to build that certainty is they have to spend time studying Allah's book. Or you will always have that kind of shaky, inshallah, yeah. We're going to Jannah, yeah. We got to go in the dirt first, right? Okay. And then we go into like gardens. You see all of that conversation? You know, once upon a time, especially like those of us who grew up like 10, 20 years ago, we never asked this kind of question, did we? It was just so natural to just believe and you were confident in it, case closed. Those were the good times. They don't really exist anymore. You have to now find different ways to convince the student now that this is real and it will be there. So I'm just going to pause there. There are several things you can do, but we're going to talk about just focusing on the knowledge in this book. And I'll tell you why I say that, because we're going to come to an ayah that's going to start piecing this conversation together. Okay. So in times of war, and whoever would fight in the path of Allah, then either he gets killed or he dominates the enemy, then soon we will give him a huge compensation. So it's talking about the martyr, okay, the shaheed. Students, what is the reward for the shaheed? Okay. So even if you're not a shaheed, can you still get Jannah? So there's no incentive then for him to go and kill himself or put himself in that situation.
But he's guaranteed.
Isn't it direct?
He's guaranteed.
That's what I want. So number one, they are guaranteed Jannah. Okay. Number two, they're not going to be at the same level as the person who didn't go in battle. They are guaranteed the highest level and status of Jannah. Our Prophet ﷺ told us some of the things that they will have is that when their soul is taken out in this world, Allah will place that soul in a beautiful green bird that will preserve and protect that soul until the Day of Judgment, and that bird will roam around in Jannah until the Day of Judgment. That's just one of its blessings. Surah Ali Imran, the families that they left behind, Allah will give them reassurance that whoever had passed away, he or she is okay. That reassurance is, what is that? What kind of reassurance is Allah referring to here? That they're in. If you lost somebody in war, how do you make yourself feel good about that? From an Islamic perspective.
To know that they died
To
for a
know
good
that they,
cause.
yeah.
Okay, so you remind yourself that they died for a good cause. Okay, anything else? Remember the New Zealand shooting? Okay, there was a mother who lost her son. And after everything had calmed down and they were, bodies were buried, janazas, everything are done. The car that he used to drive to the masjid had still been parked there. So she obviously has to now go and retrieve it. When she sits in the car, she starts it up. What started playing? It's the Qur'an from Surah Yasin, the ayat of Jannah. And she started crying. And then, one of the other family members is recording all of this. Right? So, how does Allah give you reassurance? We don't know. We don't know how that happens. But Allah says, those who died here, you will get the comfort and reassurance that they are in a good place. And Allah promised the shaheed that He will take care of their families and those they left behind. So that mother is a really difficult video to watch. So when she heard that, she started raising her hands into the sky and she just said, "Oh Allah, I know He's with you. I know." And I mean, obviously you can understand what she's saying. Like, I feel better with this sign that you've just given me. With this moment you've just allowed me to experience. It makes me feel confident that He's there. And inshallah, Allah will accept him and all those who died in that shooting. Allah will accept all of them from the shuhada, right? And why I say that is not just randomly make a dua for them, but just think back of how that story unfolded and all of the things that came out of it in terms of relationships with people who live there in that country and the leaders and so on and everything, and how it trickled down to all of us here. It was sad and it was remarkable at the same time. So what I'm saying to you is that when these ayat, when you just stare at them, they're pretty scary. I mean, who wants to go into war and battle? So these ayat were needed for companions. Because they left their parents, some of them left their wives and children back. Some of them left actually all of them left their wealth. Everything that defined who they were, they gave it up for the sake of Allah. So this is Allah comforting them. It's okay. You will soon have not just any compensation. The word ajran azima. Azim. Whenever you see azim beside reward, it means that the reward, when they see it, they have no words to describe it. They'll just be like, oh my God, all of this is for me? That's azima. Then Allah continues, verse 75, وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And what's wrong with you that you don't fight in Allah's path? So who's Allah talking to here? What's wrong with you that you don't fight in Allah's path? Who's Allah speaking to? The munafiqun. Okay, hold on. Now I need my clicky thingy. Okay, let's just do that. So, this is another verse that is constantly abused, and we'll see why. So, لا تقاتلون في سبيل الله والمستضعفين من الرجال والنساء. So, it mentions here that what's wrong with you that you don't fight in Allah's path? And those who have been made weak, so the weak, the ill of men and women and children, say, our master, deliver us out of this town. In other words, so you, the healthy munafiqun, all of you guys got everything. You still refused to go into his path. But the weak and the vulnerable and the children, instead, what did they say? Oh Allah, deliver us out of this town of the oppressive people and install for us a protective friend. So what they're saying instead is that whether you want us in battle or not, oh Allah, just keep us away from them. So, how do you confront people who have characteristics or tendencies of nifaq in them? Your starting point is to try to separate yourself. That's how you start. Do you notice that there is nothing, go confront them? No. Because that's what nifaq wants. It wants altercation. It wants confrontation. It wants to escalate. So Allah is clearly saying, stop. Back away from them. Okay? Then they made a very specific dua and install for us a protective friend. So they say, وَاجْعَلْ لَنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ وَلِيًّا. So wali, everybody knows what a wali is? Wali, like a guardian, right? So when you say the father is the wali of his daughter, what you're saying is that he will protect her interest. He guards them. So no one will ever take advantage of her if they ask for marriage. Right? That he's basically like the shield or fence around her honor, around everything that defines who she is. He protects all of that. And there are lots of walis who are walis just by name, but they're not fit to be wali. So there's definitely, right? There are definitely qualities that have to be there to define this. So just because it's my daughter, I don't care. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can fulfill the role of a wali. But in this ayah, we're not talking about the father now. Wali linguistically is also used, it's one of the terms for friendship in the Qur'an. So this is one of them. So what Allah is saying, that instead we want these kinds of friends that look out for each other. Do all of us here have a friend in our lives like that? Think about it. Do you have a friend that you know you can always count on them? They always got your back. They'll always advise you. They'll always be there for you. You can call on them at any time of the night. And if you don't have one of those friends, you might be that friend that would do that for someone else. Right? So, wali, very powerful. And it's mentioned several times throughout the Qur'an, used in different ways, but ultimately at the end, it's all around the concept of protecting and guarding somebody, their honor and so on, and their reputation and so on. And a point for us, someone who will give us aid. So, in context, look what's happened here. People got stuck in Mecca and could not make the hijrah. So there is a story behind all of this, right? One story mentions that the reason of revelation here was actually those who were left behind in Mecca. So chunk of society had migrated with the Prophet ﷺ and they're gone. These are the people who couldn't, for whatever reason. Maybe they were weak or something, or they just weren't convinced enough, whatever it is, right? So they started making this dua. Why? Because now the city of Mecca doesn't have this anymore. There's no law, there's no order. So they're begging Allah. Look, they ask for not just help, they ask for aid. Aid is nasr in the Qur'an. You just heard in Surah Al-Maghrib, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ. So whenever the aid, so nasr is like humanitarian aid. And it's always presented at a large scale. So just helping one person is not called nasr. Okay, that's called musa'ada. It's a different word. So they are asking Allah for nasr. You know what's interesting? In Surah Al-Baqarah and Surah Ali Imran, they both have an ayah that asks the question, Mata Nasrullah? When is the nasr going to come from Allah? And this third surah now, they are actually asking directly for that nasr. And if you put these three surahs together, what has this already kind of painted for you about this, the aid and the state of the Muslims at this point? It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. They don't have much. They don't have power. They don't have any authority, no say. They're a minority. Now there's no government. Everything has fallen apart. There's no leadership. There's no protection. And they're always targeted. So that's how propaganda works. Picture this for a minute. One stage of how propaganda begins is that you select a group. And then with that group, you start talking about that group. And not just talking about who or what they are, but to try to create some sense of fear and uncertainty of who these people are. And you take that kind of rhetoric, and every so often, it can't happen all the time because that would be too obvious. Every so often, you select somebody, and then you take that person and you attack them in every possible way. Not physically, but their character, their work, their reputation. Just try to annihilate them as much as you can. And also taking the things that they say or don't say, pull it out of context, create a story, and just fill the propaganda. Does this sound familiar? So what are you seeing about all of this in Meccan Qur'an? You know how we talk about Islamophobia in this day and age and all propaganda against Muslims, etc.? Actually, that started the first time ever in Mecca. Islamophobia began in the Meccan period. And we will see how and why in a moment. Okay? The Qur'an is going to prove to you that they had their fair share of this and it actually began then and trickled till now. Okay? They need to understand secular and worldly along with Islamic scholarship. So, one thing that we also capture from this ayah. Okay. This is really important, and this here, students, this portion here, this statement, this is how this ayah got abused. And remember, when we say abused, misinterpreted. You know, it wasn't explained properly. Why? Because the ayah began with people who focused just on akhirah and hereafter, right? They were going to sacrifice and move forward for the sake of Allah. Okay? Why aren't you doing that? Then it concluded that instead of asking for anything in the akhirah, they focused on, oh Allah, give us some help so we can overcome the current situation. So what it's really saying is that for all of us as believers must have what? You've got to have a little bit of both. It is fundamentally wrong for someone to study only Islam and ignore secular knowledge. Fundamentally, that is incorrect. And it's fundamentally wrong to obviously do the opposite. Unfortunately, for a long time, scholarship has always only focused on this here, just the Islamic part. That's why if you go to like most Islamic universities in other parts of the world and you study zakat, you know what they're going to teach you? They're going to teach you how to give zakat based on 10 pounds of hay that you have stored in a closet somewhere. Yeah, no exaggeration. Then they will also teach you, okay, if you have 25 cattle, 10 horses, and one of them got sick, what do you do when it comes to zakat? I'm like, that's really how zakat is taught. But RSPs, investments, banks, jewelry, actual cash, gold, so all of those things, you gotta figure that out on your own, or you gotta go back to another university somewhere else, and to build a connection. You see, the problem with this is actually addressing the attitude of many, especially young people, who are very enthusiastic. You know, they really want to get it. The guy just took his shahada this morning, and he wants to make hijrah before the night is over. You know, I'm leaving this kuffar country, man. That's it. You know, it's just like, what are you doing? You know, so this ayah is telling you to just chill, and you actually need to be well versed on both ends of the spectrum. This is something that scholarship is now catching up to. For a long time, ulama never ever had any other secular skill added to complement their Islamic knowledge. They had oceans of knowledge when it came to Islamic, things and topics and so on. But if you ask a scholar, if we were is it permissible for us to travel in space? Because I could never really find the Qibla, obviously, so I really I don't know what would I do, right? So are we allowed to? There are actual fatawas, believe it or not, that make that haram. These are some of the old books. Don't ever look for this stuff, okay? Because we have fatawas that drugs and cocaine were permissible. Yeah, from scholars. But you know why that happened? It's because they had never heard or known anything about what cocaine and this stuff was. It was okay, yeah, it's fine. People eat that? They don't die? No, they don't die. Halal. That's all they asked. There are legit stories. By the way, when Saudi first started installing cell phone towers, this was 20 years ago, about 20 years ago, there were people, scholars in Saudi, that actually took the Qur'an, went to the cell phone tower, and started reciting Qur'an over it. Because they could not understand how you could hold a device and hear a human being's voice through it. So when they realized that the source of that came from the cell phone tower, just imagine how this looked, right? Poor guy. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ, and just perhaps the thing would crumble down. I don't know, right? See, so that's why it is so crucial to learn a little bit of both. All right? And our the Qur'an itself, it actually calls to that. But unfortunately, these are some of the things that people become overzealous about and misinterpret. Mm-hmm.
Couldn't you say the same thing if you refer back to Ayah 74?
Mm-hmm.
Just being sort of somehow strategically manipulated by Muslim countries.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Then what does it come down to? How the person feels who is in that war? Is that what it comes? Because it's not very clear a lot of times.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Verse 74 can certainly be misinterpreted and cause just chaos, especially for innocent people as well, and give off the wrong message and the intentions and so on. So for the most part, these ayat focus on both. Focus on individual intentions, but to always remember the call for battle in Islam can never happen alone by a small party or group. It requires, and you can read this in fiqh books, it requires unanimous consensus of scholars in that part of the world, in that region, who are afflicted and directly, afflicted with whatever chaos is happening. And they also must work with the government. So people who are running and who control the law of the land, both parties have to come together and have to have a unanimous consensus that this is the only way for us to protect our way of life. It would have to be through battle. This is a massive, massive process. Even I'm not qualified to tell you what they are. I don't really know it myself in terms of the meticulous details. But it's a long process. And remember, the Battle of Uhud alone, it went back and forth, the Prophet ﷺ going back and forth to communities and to senior companions and to young people to get counsel from them. What do you guys think? What should I do? You guys are saying no. Those guys are saying yes. You all are confused. We got to figure this out because they're on their way. Why didn't the Prophet ﷺ just ask Allah to make the decision? I'm your Prophet, O Allah. Could you just tell me what to do here? So he was indirectly teaching us well. There's a process here. So unfortunately, the people who just take and cherry pick all of this stuff and just be like, yeah, I'm going to go across the world, I'm going to go do this and join that. You've completely misinterpreted these verses. That's not what they're talking about. Okay? And there's no call for any individual to make that decision on their own. Right? And unfortunately, it has only left people who have made decisions like that, has only made life impossible for them and their families as well. There's no good that ever really came out of it. Anyhow, let's just continue. There's a couple more things that I want to mention. Okay. We've got about a half hour-ish or so because, as you all know, today they are going to have the khatam. So if those of you who can stay for Isha, it's more or less just supporting our Qari, Abdul Fattah. It's kind of supporting him. What he did, it was a personal choice. He didn't have to do that. But it's an enormous and incredibly accomplishment. Right? I personally have done it a few times before when I was imam in other places. And I can tell you, man, it is one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my whole life. Talk about temptation. Talk about laziness. Talk about battling your nafs. You just want to finish the Qur'an in salah because you want to protect it. You don't want to lose it. But the shaitan seems to multiply his efforts 10 times over because you have that kind of intention. And I got to tell you, man, my journey through that same process, the amount of mistakes I would make and people shouting behind me, trying to correct me, for the most simplest verses like Ayatul Kursi. I could never forget how I messed up Ayatul Kursi. Now you could read the whole Qur'an, but the one verse you're reciting 25 times a day, I flew off and I made up my own surah. It was really bad, right? And it was so bad that I had to break the salah and just go into ruku because I couldn't figure out Ayatul Kursi. It was so the point is that there's a lot of mental preparation and it's very, very difficult to recite Qur'an this way. Really hard. So it's really an incredible accomplishment for him. So we want to just kind of support him how we can. So with that being said, let's just continue with a few more verses. There's a few more things that I really want to capture. Ayah number 76, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Those who have iman, they will actually engage in the path of Allah. Okay, so we've already talked about that. That's what iman does. Keeps you on the path that only pleasing Allah is the ultimate focus. And those who have disbelieved, they fight in the path of the rebellious one, then fight the intimate friends of shaitan. And the plot of shaitan has always been weak. Look at this statement here. The plot of shaitan has never been anything substantial, guaranteed, 100%, long-term. None of his plots work this way. They're all just for the moment. And if you pass that moment, you end up confronting another trap. But that one trap will never extend for a long period. That's not how shaitan's plot works. Allah did not give him the ability to do that. Instead, they will have multiple avenues of temptation and that sort of thing. So the point of this ayah here is Allah is calling out those that fight, those who have disbelieved, what are their attitudes on the battlefield. It's all about, we just got to take them down. We got to win this. Right? So that attitude, okay, they did this to us. We need to come back now and recapture our land, our property, our resources, etc. What Allah is saying here, that when you are in battle, fi sabilillah, that is actually not the attitude you're supposed to have. Your focus is not to your focus is not to take out as much people as you can. No, that's not what this is about. Your focus is that you try to protect Allah's deen, and again, all of the components that need to be there are in place. You don't get to make that decision all out by yourself. So, here's what's happening. Now we're going to see in Mecca, the Meccan period, there was a movement, a non-violent movement that began, and we're going to see how this all played out. So if we're going to talk about non-violent campaigns and protests and things like that, this is how it all began. So all that you hear and you see about Muslims who try to stand up against hate, against Islamophobia, all of these things, well, here's how it all began. So in Meccan Qur'an, so how many years is Meccan Qur'an, by the way? How many years? Approximately what? 13-ish kind of years, okay? So Allah says, Alam tara ila alladhina. Here's the thing, didn't you look? Alam tara. Didn't you analyze? In other words, Allah is saying, you walked before you stopped and think. You acted. So Alam tara, always in Qur'an, there is a bit of pause and sarcasm attributed to it. It's like, Allah's like, what's wrong with you? Didn't you think this through? Okay, what is Allah talking about? Alam tara ila alladhina qila lahum kuffu. Didn't you look towards those that were told to hold your hands back? Non-violent resistance. This is really, absolutely remarkable. I took a long time to think how I wanted to present this ayah. And this ayah here is literally going to teach you and I how to respond and deal with hate even when it comes in its physical form, okay? Allah says here, kuffu. The root word of kuffu is kaffa, which means to stop with your hand, like this. You resist. Get away from me. So somebody's trying to attack you. You push them away. That's called kaffa. But the ayah doesn't say kaffa. It says kuffu. So kuffu, you don't push anymore. You kind of take the beating and sort of protect yourself. That's how Allah wants you to start your defense. Is that different from how we see and might hear or even be taught how to defend ourselves? Is that different? Because usually, if you take self-defense classes, what do they teach you? Okay, when the attacker comes, grab their hand, twist it 3 angles this way, hit their elbow, get the joint, and they're down. But self-defense in Qur'an is what? Well, it's many things, but here's one of them. What does Allah say? Just protect yourself. The Muslim, this is remarkable to me. Where he or she, certainly, it's not a life and death situation. It's almost as if Allah is saying, if you got to take a little of the beating, just protect yourself. If it gets real crazy, then obviously that will come. Your defense will come. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about, so you have some of the leaders of the Quraysh, some of the tribal leaders. You know what they started doing in Mecca? They couldn't stop the movement. They couldn't stop the Prophet ﷺ's message. Because what they had noticed is even their own tribal leaders who are trying to confront this man, what did they end up doing? They ended up accepting Islam from him. So some of these tribal leaders got together and they said, listen, now we're really under threat here. We're going to lose Mecca. And then on top of that, this man's walking around telling people about halal and haram income. So now our economy is at risk. This entire industry now, like everything is falling apart. We need to somehow figure out how to stop this. And the movement is growing rapidly. Does this sound familiar, by the way? In this day and age, what is the fastest religion, growing religion in the world? It's Islam. Despite what? Everything that's unfolding and with the propaganda, the campaigns, etc. Billions of dollars invested in this stuff. How come this religion still continues to grow? Here's something interesting for you to think about as well. Have you, I wouldn't say have you, but how often have you ever heard of an Islamic scholar leaving Islam? It's almost unheard of. But we certainly have countless stories of other religions, even like their scholars, kind of left and came over to this path. But those who actually spend time and engross themselves learning this deen, there was just no turning back for them. Like that's, again, another tool that you could use to really confirm that this is the message from Allah. And so all of His promises, they will be there. Because He said He will protect this deen. He said He'll do that, didn't He? He said He'll protect the Qur'an, didn't He, right? So until this day, all of that is intact. And instead of Islam going down, it just continues to grow at a rapid rate. We as Muslims can't even keep track of it no more. We don't even actually know, what the figures are in this world. We say sometimes 2.4 billion, 2.5 billion, whatever it is. It could be much more. Or 1.4, 1.2, whatever it is, right? So Allah is saying that your first line of defense is non-violent resistance, which I think is really unbelievably remarkable. Now, okay, let's just take a look at what happened here next. Qila. They were told. Qila. In passive, maybe the mess. Okay, so didn't you look towards those that were told? Who's doing the talking here? Those who were told. Who told what to who? Those that were told. Who told this group anything? No one really knows. So who had done the talking here? Some tafsirs mention that it maybe possibly could have been the Prophet ﷺ who instructed them, okay, hold your hands back, but don't engage. And that would also make a lot of sense, wouldn't it, right? He's rahmatul lil alameen. He's not going to go around punching and kicking anyone, even if they've hurt him. And it's happened quite a bit, hasn't it? Prophet ﷺ has been attacked before? Has there been attempts on his life?
Yes.
Yeah. Has he been severely injured as a result?
Yes.
There are several times in his life where he almost died, right? What did he do about it? Is there any story of him retaliating? And is there any story of him when he lost his tooth and his cheek split open? Did he say to any companion, yeah, you know who did this to me? It was so-and-so. Go get him. Never. So it would make sense that it could possibly have been, this instruction could have been from him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? The first non-violent movement of change is in Meccan Seerah. And take a look at this. 2/3 of the Qur'an is revealed in Meccan period. This is really, really important. What's Meccan Qur'an? What makes Meccan Qur'an unique from Madani Qur'an? Yeah.
The Meccan period was when the established rulings were coming down, like Iman and Jannah and
Good. So what do we have here? Take a look at the word. I'm pointing at it. See ya? Methodology of introducing Islam. Universal values of justice. So when we introduce Islam to others, what is the Qur'an indirectly telling you to start with? The basics. Not, okay, son, when we go in the grocery store, I'm going to tell you what's halal and haram, okay? There's something called gelatin. I know you can't pronounce the word, but it's haram. Okay, just trust me. You know, you tell your kids, you see, don't look around. Change the channel, it's haram. Because it's just bad, just don't look at that. That's all fine. Who are they trying to please doing that stuff? Allah. Mom, Dad, what's Allah? That's the conversation. Because 2/3 of how Allah introduced His book was just only on that. Salah, zakat, charity, Ramadan, Hajj, all of that stuff came in Madani Qur'an. You know, Salah actually got legislated very late in Meccan Qur'an. Okay, very late. And even when it was legislated, not all of the rules were complete. The rules and the fiqh of Salah, all of that got completed in Madani Qur'an. So even if somebody, now does this make sense that when you're talking to somebody about Islam, especially a revert, and you tell them, hey, you got to pray at least 5 times a day, and they tell you things like, I can't, I don't know if I could, or I can pray but I can't do the hijab part. I told you my story about this, right? So you see where I get this from? So the hijab stuff, okay, fine. You forget that example. I've met tons of students over the years where, especially like some of the sisters who struggle with their hijab. So what I usually say to them, especially when they come from a good family and so on, but this is a personal struggle, like they just can't seem to do it, or they can't do it all the time. I usually say to them, okay, if you can't cover your head, just cover everything else. The head will come. Because that's how Allah introduced it in Qur'an. The first cover for the woman was not the head scarf. What was it? The jilbab, the body scarf came first. Surah Al-Ahzab. Then this came afterwards. Then the head cover came afterwards. So if you follow how Qur'an introduced these principles to the rest of the world, then you stand a better chance of getting your message across. That's easier said than done. That's the problem. This is not easy. Anybody who tells you, oh, it's right there in the Qur'an, oh, you don't worry about it. Don't listen to them. This is really hard. And the Prophet ﷺ, you know, he could have lost his life several times in this process. So this is not easy to do. No rituals, okay. So let's finish this up. So now that you've gone through some level of non-violent resistance, look what Allah says here. And perform your prayers and spend in charity. Wait a minute, what? Somebody's trying to fight me? Somebody's campaigning against me? Character assassination all over the media? And you're saying, I gotta go pray? Students, what's the connection here? This is an ayah all about Islamophobia. Like, you really want to capture the juice in this ayah, as much of it as you can.
Earlier you were saying that when you were answering one of the sisters' questions that if you were focusing on who is a hypocrite, what happens, you kind of slowly introduce that. So when you're questioning why these people are attacking you, you may not take care of your priority, keeping your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 1, 2, when you think about your prayer and charity, which you work really hard for, if you fight back, you might be actually giving them your good deeds.
Yeah.
And then there's a very visual to this, that even when you pray, when you're raising your hand, you're not pushing back, you're putting it on your chest, like you're actually protecting yourself, just like
Okay, it's an interesting way of looking at it. Good. What I want to bring to your attention is, you ever meet those Muslims that are really involved in like civil rights and activism and so on, right? It's a really hard job to do. Only a handful of people, Muslims can do that kind of work, because you're 1 or 2 or a small committee and you're confronting a beast. right? And that's on the one hand. But very often what happens is that there may be that person, and this actually happens quite often with people who get engrossed in that kind of work. And if you get into politics and so on, you kind of sacrifice some of your values and you kind of develop a real ultra-liberal perspective and opinion about your religion now. Because why? Because the culture that you've engrossed yourself in, it's so overwhelming, right? It's very easy to be lured into that. Does this make sense? So what Allah is doing here, it's not just prayer, meaning just make sure you pray. It's that all of this scrutiny and target and criticism and protest and campaign to stop your message, what Allah is doing here is reinforcing your priority. Don't lose track what you're supposed to do. And the number one tool that we have to preserve and protect our Islam is what? Salah. If you're shaky in prayers, even if you pray, but then you kind of don't pray, you have to beg Allah to repair that in you so that you don't leave this world in that state. If you don't pray, your whole entire spiritual life is finished, in the sense that nothing may have value to you anymore. So this is the person who doesn't pray, or you pray once in a while. Prayer is the lifeline, it is the bloodline, the spiritual lifeline, the spiritual bloodline for a believer. You miss that, everything is just done in vain. Our Prophet ﷺ told us that salah is miftahun li kulli khair. It's the key to every goodness in this world, even in the hereafter. You know, prayer, when it's done properly, it's incredible how much it repairs in your life, emotionally, psychologically, physically even. There are stories of companions, okay, who would get stung by a scorpion. You know what they do? There's a story of one of the students of Ibn Abbas. A scorpion came and stung his arm and it started to swell and get infected. He goes to his teacher. What do I do? Look what happened. Teacher told him, go pray and ask Allah to cure you. Oh, okay. Just goes in, starts praying 2 nafil. Within 3 days, it disappeared. And that's what prayer can do for you. That doesn't mean that if you're chilling out at the bar, you ignore the word gelatin on every product, and you're like, okay, I got cancer now, but I think I can, if I just pray, I can pray it out. No. These things all, look what ayah we're at, by the way. Ayah number what? 77. Then Allah talked to us about this. It didn't come in ayah number 1 or 2. So there means there's a lot of things that came before this conversation. So you have to build that connection with prayer. Very quick question, because this is so important and so relative to all of us. How do you make salah work for you? Aside from learning all of the things that we've done, just more on a personal level, how do you make prayer work for you? I had a professor in Medina. Anytime I asked him a question, myself or any other student, asked him anything about what do we do in this situation, his only answer was salah. Ustad, if I have a crush on somebody, how do I stop that? Pray. Ustad, I stole something and I can't return it, so what do I do? Pray. Ustad, I want to get married, but no one likes me. Pray. Everything was just pray. And I used to think this professor knows nothing. That's why he's saying that. He doesn't know anything. And then as time progresses, then you realize, subhanAllah, man, it makes sense. It's the key to all goodness. Yeah.
It enters strength from
Would that
prayers.
fall under the category of salah al-istikhara? If you wanted to do something and you pray and what you get guidance?
So the recommended types of prayers is not what's being talked about here. And our conversation, only the 5 prayers we're talking about. Okay? Because all the recommended stuff, the istikhara, salatul shukr, duha, sunnah prayer, that's hard, right? And lots of Muslims just can't keep up with that. I like to focus on, because we're in Meccan Qur'an, I like to just kind of concentrate on the foundation. So we are just going to stick to this. If somebody uses istikhara and those other sunnah prayers, you know what your fence of protection becomes? It's not made out of bricks anymore. Now it's made out of steel. Then if you start praying tahajjud, now you have like alarm bells and security all attached to the steel. Then you pray to solve every one of your problems. Your fence now becomes permanent. There's nothing in this earth that can penetrate it. So that's how you add layers to that, right? You were going to say something?
I was just gonna say, how do you respond to people that have mental health issues and depression? Because they're keep getting this message to pray, but that's what they're struggling with.
Yeah.
And so it's causing them even more anxiety, depression.
So I've given a talk about this before, where people who have mental stress, mental issues, for them in particular, the basic principles don't always apply to them. Because our Prophet ﷺ told us that the pen is raised for the person who what? Who is sane, but for whatever reason, they kind of just drifted, whether it's through depression or other mental illnesses. So I don't like it, and I really speak out against this when I hear others say things like, "Oh, if you're in that state, do you understand what I'm saying? You still gotta pray when you're lying down, even when you're asleep. Just make your eyelids pray." Like they start enforcing that stuff on them, and that's additional burden on top of all the mental stress they already have. They're already suffering from a bankruptcy of just relating to this stuff, and you add to that. So I usually just kind of treat situations like that on a case-by-case scenario, right? There is not one law that goes across the board for people who have mental illnesses when it comes to this stuff. No, right? So they definitely need to just have the right direction and counsel, and the decision can be made there. But then go back to my question now. How do you make salah work for you? Yeah.
I guess you don't make salah work for you, you work for salah, you revolve your life around salah, and like your schedule shouldn't be, oh, salah is coming, so your schedule should be around salah, rather than your life goes on, and then when salah comes, you're like, oh, okay, now I have to pray and get on with it and like move on.
So organize your life and cater for salah, and don't make salah cater for you. Good. Anything else?
You get your strength, I feel. I get strength through salah.
How? This is really important, and I really want all of us to take something out of this conversation, right? How do you make salah work for you? There's one ingredient. If you have it, you win. There's one discipline with salah. If you hold on to it with your life, you win. You get everything salah has to offer you and more with this one thing.
To prioritize, to make time.
Let's see who's going to get this.
Remember Allah.
Whoever answers this perfectly, you will get a very, very loud Jazakallahu khairan, okay? Yes?
When you remember Allah, He remembers you.
I feel if you have that love for Allah in your heart all the time, you're not going to want to miss your salah because you love your salah and you love Allah and you want to put
Okay, you're right. So put this in, make this practical. You've got all of those things intact. But this one thing, if you hold on to it, everything falls into place with salah.
Okay, so it gives
Tell me that. One more person. Let me hear.
hope. It gives you hope.
Remember that, that's what you need.
Commitment for the
Prayer on time.
Yeah, we see that.
أي عمل أحب إلى الله. What's the action? The man came to Prophet ﷺ and asked him, what's the one thing Allah loves? What did Prophet ﷺ say? He didn't say prayer. He didn't say prayer with khushu. All that stuff is important. First, piece of advice. Pray and pray on time. Yes, so all of those who miss Fajr 7 months of the year, this is why Salah won't work for you the way that it's designed to. If you do this, especially if anybody struggles with this, like if you can get this kind of routine going, this is how Allah, like you start to see clarity in everything that Allah is and everything that He's promised. Like Islam the blurriness of it starts to clear out now. And I don't know what that is. And I honestly believe that is just Allah blessing your life. Like it's the barakah of your effort. And by the way, this is a lifelong journey. To keep the discipline of praying on time, this is especially where we live, because we live in a system where it doesn't cater to this stuff. So it's really hard to do this. All right? Yeah.
So, how do we reconcile this with when it's also encouraged to pray Jumu'ah in groups and that's not necessarily prayed on time?
Jumu'ah?
Yeah. Like, for example, Isha is being offered at 9, so it's offered later. But how do you reconcile that?
No. So when we say pray on time, within the time frame of that prayer, right? And so there's another question. There's a deeper question. Within the time frame, what is the best time within that time frame? The beginning, middle, or end? The beginning. Okay? Prophet ﷺ specifically mentions when he says, ala waqtiha, ala, above, meaning right at the very start of that time, that's ideal. But if you, for whatever reason, you can't get the break in time, you can't get to a place in time, your goal is to at least, the bare minimum, stay within the time period of that prayer, okay? So that's what we mean when we say pray on time. Man, I can tell you, just think about if you've had a week, so 7 days, where you did this every day. And more or less, it's actually more rare for the average Muslim to actually average their prayers this way, where 7 days they actually got every prayer on time. That's really hard to do. And it's not always the person's fault, right? A lot of other components around us don't make it any easier, right? So I totally get that.
So what is the time frame between that? I didn't know there was a time frame. I thought it was on time.
Okay, so we're done this. Let's go to fiqh of salah now, right? Last question, okay? And then we get back into this. So, what time does... If you didn't have a clock, what time does Maghrib begin?
6:30 sunset.
When does sun set? Yeah. What's happening in the horizon when the sun is about to set? What's happening there? There's a discoloration. What color is it going to? So now there are actual hadith, very specific, describing these details. You're looking for the orangish, purplish color that starts to develop when, as soon as that process begins, Maghrib time begins. Meaning, it's time for adhan. This is essential in Ramadan. Because you know how some people wait for the adhan to finish? That's not from the sunnah to do that. Because what if there is no adhan? What are you going to do? So you always start your iftar as soon as you see this color starts to change. And it's not bright. It's not Asr time. It's not bright anymore. You know that for sure. Once you start seeing that, then you know Maghrib time is in. Okay. When does Maghrib time end? Okay, you don't have no time. You just got to look at the horizon. How do you know Maghrib time has ended? Oh my God.
After sunset.
Well, I heard somebody said it. When it's what? Okay, when it's dark. Meaning, be specific. It's too vague still. When you say dark. What are you actually looking for to know, okay, it is now darkness? When the sky is black, not dark purple. Right? Not dark blue. It's black, but I still see like a shade of orange. No. It's black. And it's black, right? It's black. But look how scholars go into this subject. That visual confirmation cannot even come from somebody who wears glasses. It's got to be natural. So if somebody who wears glasses, they can only add to somebody who doesn't. They can be like added confirmation. But you can't depend on that because like, I don't know, but it's literally what it says. It's just that tiny possibility of uncertainty, right? So they don't even want to take no chance. So, Maghrib, to answer the question, you know when it begins? Soon as you see pitch black, everybody else says, yeah, it is black. If one person wants to just say, no, I see blue, just kick him out of that conversation. But everything else, right, it's black, right? And that's when Maghrib. So once you get Maghrib in that time frame, inshallah, you're good to go. Let's finish up this ayah. We've got about 3 minutes left. And spend in regular charity. And spend in regular charity. وَأَقِيمُوا وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ فَلَمَّا كُتِبَ عَلَيْهِمُ الْقِتَالُ. Very quick question. When Allah keeps saying to Meccans, make sure you pay your zakat, or at least spend from your wealth zakat. Almost every companion household is poor. They probably need zakat. So this is probably talking to whom? A very small fragment of Meccans living there. But the point is, they still got an order in this ayah. Despite that they were just maybe a small population or group, they were called out. Why? Because it's absolutely crucial for the rest of the community to survive that zakat continues to be distributed, right? So the point is here, you're starting to see how Allah balances this out. And then it continues. But when fighting was ordained for them, a faction of them feared the people as Allah is ought to be feared. So the call for battle came out. A group of them, they were like, Sami'na wa ata'na. We're ready, let's go. But then, or even more. And then they said, O Master, why did you perceive, or prescribe it should say. I don't even know what that is. So it should say prescribe, okay? Why did you prescribe fighting for us? Is that a valid question? Why do we have to go to battle? Why can't you just stop war? You ever hear these questions? If Allah is so merciful, why does He allow so much war, so much killing happening in the world? Look at the question. It came from Meccan Qur'an, the same question. Why are you making us go into all of this chaos? If only you would postpone it for us for a short while. You see what they're saying? They're even just asking Allah if you can just delay the call for a moment. If you could just delay for a little bit. Qul, say, who's doing this? Who says say? Who's getting that order? The Prophet ﷺ. So to answer this question, the Prophet is ordered to say, مَتَاعُ الدُّنْيَا قَلِيلٌ. The enjoyments of this life are brief. What's our interpretation of that? Our version of that? If somebody says, why is there so much? Why do we have to, why does this all continue? Why is all this chaos happening? What's our version in terms of this response? Give a 2019 version of a similar response. Or nobody's going home.
It's a test.
It's a test, okay. It's a temporary world. Right? It's like, guys, we're getting old. We're not getting younger. We're aging, we're getting older. So this is an opportunity. So we're talking about in context, if you were sitting there, it's an opportunity to actually leave this world in the best state possible. So again, shifting your focus on what? To Allah again. Okay? Let's pause there because there's some points here that open up another conversation. So I'll stop there inshallah. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. So students,